Good morning. It's good to see everyone out this morning. So we'll be picking up in lesson 5 over in 1 Samuel chapter 25. But before we do that, let's go ahead and run through the 17 time periods again. Before the flood, the scattering of the people, the patriarchs, the Exodus, wandering in the wilderness, invasion and conquest of Canaan, the judges, the united kingdom, the divided kingdom, Judah alone, the captivity, return from captivity, the years of silence, the life of Christ, the early church, and the letters to the Christians. All right, so as we continue with the United Kingdom, lesson 6, which hopefully we'll get into this morning, will finish us up in the book of 1 Samuel, and we'll be getting into 2 Samuel now, totally focused on David there in 2 Samuel and also in 1 Chronicles chapter 11 through 29, and then toward the end of the quarter it'll be Solomon, 1 Kings 1 through 11, and 2 Chronicles 1 through 9. So we spent a little bit of time on question number 1 last week, talking about the death of Samuel and kind of a changing of the guard, Samuel being the spiritual leader of Israel, being a judge, being a prophet, and now it being entirely on the kings. Obviously, Saul is still king at this point, but we're working toward David being king. And we have a very interesting story over in chapter 25, and I think that we could probably spend a whole lot of time just talking about this question and the different characters here, but I ask, what characteristics and attitudes do we see on display by Nabal, David, and Abigail in chapter 25, and what can we learn from them? Francis?
Nadab was rich, he was harsh, he was evil, he was selfish, and he was a scoundrel. Abigail was good, understanding, beautiful, and a peacemaker. And David was kind, peaceful, and a protector.
Okay, so all of those are really good descriptions. I might add a little bit to David there. We see a little bit different character and attitude shown in David in this situation than what we have seen in the past. It is interesting. Starting off in the chapter, it's pretty blunt as far as who Nabal is and who Abigail is. It says that she was beautiful, intelligent, and the man was harsh, evil in his dealings. So what does the word Nabal actually mean? Fool. Boy, that's a pretty good description of him, ain't it? I would think one of the characteristics that we could talk about right off the bat with him is foolishness. And Francis mentioned his selfishness, and that was a huge part of it, his pride. So what was I guess what we would say the initial characteristic or attitude that we see displayed by David? Because it wasn't good. April?
You see a rashness in his, just really quick to respond in a harsh way. Yeah,
so we see his anger, his impulsiveness, and he felt like he had been wronged, and he needed justice, he needed revenge because of that. And obviously that's not what we have seen thus far. We'll talk about this with one of our next questions and kind of how we see David handling the situation with Saul and how we see him handling the situation here with Nabal. But with both Nabal and David, what is the primary issue with the both of them in the story? They both kind of have the same attitude or mindset. So Francis already mentioned it in regards to Nabal. So with Nabal, he says, "Shall I take my bread and my water and my meat, and I have killed for my shares, and give it to the men who come from I don't know where," is basically what he's saying. So what's it about? Okay, it's about me. And then David, after Nabal refuses help, he thinks in terms of what he deserves, well, I was due this respect, and I didn't get this respect, and now I'm going to do something about it. And so it's the wrong that he has sustained, and so he's focused on his own self and his own sense of judgment and his own feelings in this situation. And so it's all about their own selfishness, and it's me. Both of them are acting like kids. And then you got Abigail stepping in, trying to act like the adult in the situation. And I think that the way that she's described right there in the beginning, as far as a woman of intelligence and also beautiful in form, with this intelligence, I mean, we see an enormous amount of wisdom that she is showing, discernment, recognizing the situation, recognizing that her husband's been pretty dumb, but also recognizing that David's probably fixing to do something that's not very wise as well, and being able to recognize that and then approach it with the humility that she approaches it with. And along with the humility, there's obviously a sense of boldness that comes from this. She is admitting kind of the faults of her own husband. She didn't consult her husband about this beforehand, and goes to David. And we see her ultimately being a peacemaker. And I think that with anything in this story, we should be an Abigail for sure. And while David was very foolish, very impulsive kind of in the beginning, and selfish in everything, the good thing about it is he was willing to listen to wisdom. And of course, he thanked Abigail for saving him from doing something that he knew he shouldn't have done. And I think that one of the situations with David is it was all based on emotionalism. He got his feelings hurt. He felt disrespected. And when that happens, we can very easily make very poor decisions. And so we got to make sure that we don't fall into that trap, and hope that if we do have somebody like an Abigail at our side who is able to pull us back. Norm?
When I first thought about this question, I thought of David's general character as such, and when he sensed injustice, he got angry at it. We talk about righteous anger. Righteous anger is a good initiating thing to get us to do something. His something was then driven by emotion, and it would have ended up with a bad result. It's one of those danger points that when the Bible talks about us, God gets angry. We should get angry at injustice, but it's what do you do after that? And I think we get a hint here where we should seek wise counsel before acting, and that's where God comes in His Word, and in David's case here, he had a beautiful intercession by Abigail, and given him an opportunity to settle down and then take the proper action.
Yes, absolutely. Daddy?
We've seen David in the past. He was very concerned for his men. I mean, he wanted to take care of him. So I'm kind of going at this a little bit different angle. I mean, we're saying, certainly he was irrational. It seemed like, but I took it that he was, needed to feed his man. He was trying to take care of his man, and he had already been taking care of Nabal's people, the sheep herders out in the field and things, And when he meets Abigail, she's begging him to not do this thing, because and she says in verse 28, "Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battle of the Lord." So, looking at it a little bit different angle, that David was really just trying to take care of his man, and he was about to go in and take the food, or whatever he needed to take care of his man. So there's a little bit different angle to look at it as well.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with what Norm said, and I don't disagree with that either. I think in the beginning it was righteous anger. I think that he had a right to be upset. And I'm trying to look for the verse where he actually talks about him, Abigail keeping him from sinning. Verse 32. Then David said, "Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me, and blessed be your discernment, and blessed be you who have kept me from this day from bloodshed, from the avenging myself by my own hand. And so,
You got verse 39. So, and that reminds me of Romans 12. It was, Nabal did him wrong. The servants recognized it. His wife recognized it. David speaks of it here, but how the Lord kept him back from doing evil. And so, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. He was done wrong, but let the Lord take care of it, and he did.
yeah, and again, I think he definitely was a man that was trying to take care of his men. We see that a little bit later on. We'll talk about it in another question. But I think he also recognized there was a little bit of self vengeance that was going to take place if it had not been for Abigail stepping in. Daddy, you had something else?
Well, verse 33, of course, it depends on what translation you're reading, but, he said, blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from blood guilt and from working salvation with my own hand. I agree he was irrational, and what the other passages are saying, but again, I don't know that he was just selfish in his own way. I mean, I think he was, again, and from what we'd seen in the past, he had done whatever he needed to do to keep those men alive.
Right. Anything else on number 2? Go ahead, Ken.
I'm just impressed with David's humility, because, like we saw in the case of, well, in this case especially, he's willing to listen to Abigail and take her advice. And I was thinking of, also, what was the other example I was thinking of? I don't remember, it slipped my mind. But anyway, I just think his humility is impressive. He's willing to listen to someone who has, some reasoning to give him to keep him from doing evil. So,
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking of Nathan. When Nathan came to him, he immediately repented.
Right. Yeah. Definitely when it was shown to him, the humble heart there. All right, question number 3. So thinking about Abigail's interaction with David, read Proverbs 2:2-7, and 12:15. What lessons can we learn from this? So over in Proverbs chapter 2, beginning in verse 2, it says, My son, if you will receive my words and treasure my commandments within you, make your ear attentive to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment, lift up your voice for understanding. If you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasure, then you will discern the fear of the Lord and discover the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity. And then Proverbs 12:15, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. So, again, I think we've kind of established, I think in the beginning David did have righteous anger. I think that he was probably a little bit selfish in his judgment, so I'm basing my questions based on that. So thinking of that in this situation, and then Abigail coming in with the wisdom. So what can we learn from this with the situation there with David and Abigail, and what we glean from the Proverbs? Norm?
Don't act rashly.
All right. Don't act rashly or impulsively.
Give your decision some time between the event and the decision.
All right. Francis?
You ask God for wisdom and the strength and his knowledge to make the right decisions, and make all your decisions on something that God would be proud of.
All right. Yep. Todd, did you raise your hand? Go ahead.
You can certainly benefit from a wise counselor, and that may be your own wife. In this case, they weren't married yet, but David knew not to avenge himself in the case of Saul in the prior chapter, but then he's kind of losing control here, and he's about to do the very thing that he knows not to do. And it took her to kind of be that sounding board for him to recognize it in himself. Sometimes you'll hear of a man who's, maybe his wife passes away, and I've heard people say he lost his filter. And he kind of is more rash, more uncontrolled, and we should recognize the real value you have in a good woman to help you filter your craziness sometimes.
Yes. So I said in the last one, be an Abigail, also marry an Abigail. And it definitely will help. I think that just this idea of seeking wisdom, and like Francis said over in James, obviously if we want wisdom, we need to ask of God, and that's one thing that we should strive for, but it's also a situation where, we're not going to be perfect all the time, and wise counsel, not necessarily even our own wisdom, but wise counsel can be a protection against poor decisions. And I think that happens more so whenever we are emotional or whenever our own pride is involved, and that tends to cloud our judgment. And so when you are in the process of making some decision, and maybe you should recognize that about yourself, I'm in a situation where I'm emotional because of what's going on, maybe it would be good to actually seek some wise counsel, because the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. And someone that actually seeks that as well, not just, obviously David didn't seek this, Abigail was just the wise one in the situation, but be someone that actually seeks that counsel. Daddy?
I think this is such a great example of Abigail. She amazed me what she did. One reason is because, over the years, I've recognized, women that have controlled their husbands. And it's we get carried away kind of like David did, and it's just a great example of humility and wisdom that this woman showed. You want to find a good house, a good home, a good family, and you see a good family, look at the wife.
Yeah, we see how Abigail didn't go and consult Nabal. Of course, she admits even who Nabal is, and she recognizes that. But she is trying to help him too. I mean, she's trying to help the situation, and she is trying to help her own husband. And I think just naturally, men have a bigger problem with pride and maybe making rash decisions. And so, having that wife to kind of help and do that in a humble way, kind of behind the scenes, is definitely a great thing. Sam?
So when you read at the beginning of 1 Peter chapter 3 about how Christian wives should conduct themselves, how they should win over their husbands, does it say without a word? They without a word may be won by the conduct of their wives. In my mind, my human mind, it would, I guess, make more sense for Abigail to go talk to Nabal and to say, hey, you're acting kind of goofy right now, instead of going to David and saying my husband's a fool. How do you balance out her doing the right thing with respect to David's situation, and how she should act with humility? Is it just different how she calls her husband as his name is?
So I think that when you're newlywed, you don't know each other as well. Give a little bit of time, and Maddie's going to know you better than maybe even you know yourself. I think that there's a sense of honesty here. I mean, the scriptures tell us before Abigail says it, this guy's an absolute fool, and she knows that, and she's admitting that. And so I think she's got the wisdom to recognize, if I go to Nabal, nothing's going to change. And David is the one that has the power in this situation to be able to do harm to her family. And so she's trying to protect her family in that situation. And I don't see any other way that that's going to happen with as clear as the scriptures are of how much of a fool Nabal was. I think that she did the absolute right thing. I don't think that she was doing it because she's trying to skirt around his back. I think she's truly trying to protect her family. And David was the one that was going to rightfully do them harm in this situation. Todd?
Yeah, you notice in verse 17, even the young men knew that no one can speak to him. So I guess Abigail would have known that as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, husbands and wives know each other pretty well. And I think in a situation, if we're talking about real life situations with our own spouses, we have to recognize that they love us and they're going to do things for our benefit. And so I don't know that we'll be in a similar situation to this, but if we were and our wife did something like this and ultimately protected us, I think that we need to kind of swallow our own pride and be appreciative of, thank you for saving me, just like David was in this situation. Thank you for saving me from, keeping me from evil. Francis?
In verse 37, so it was in the morning when the wine had gone from Nabal, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him, and he became like a stone. So she did tell him, but she knew there's no point in telling him when he's full of the wine. So in essence, like you said, she didn't really go behind his back. She just knew it was impossible to do anything at the time. But time was at essence. It had to be done before David got there.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That his heart was, when his wife told him these things, that his heart died within him. Did he understand that what she did was the right thing to do, that he was wrong, or it was God's intervention here that...
Yeah, there's a couple things that I've read on that. One of the things I read said he may have had a stroke. I mean, I don't know how you know that. The other thing I read said that he just hardened his heart. I'm not for sure.
But in other words, she did go to him and explain, but there was no point in doing anything before, because the time was allowed.
Right. Did I see another hand? Drew? Okay.
I was just going to say, I mean, some people are just so rotten in their character. And Todd pointed out the verse I was going to, that the servants even knew about their master. He's just an unreasonable person. You can't speak to him. You can't reason with him. Obviously, she knew that. We're told her character, we're told his character. And we don't know how long these two have been married, but she's been putting up with this guy day in and day out. And she's still a godly woman. And thankfully, it hadn't embittered her. So she went to the man that she believed could be reasoned with, the man after God's own heart, that had been chosen to be the next king.
Yeah. Norm?
I can't help but think of the term agape here, the love that we're supposed to have, the sacrificial love, that love that does whatever is necessary for a person. And Abigail is she's doing what's best for Nabal by doing what she did. And so that's true love. That is agape. And it's sometimes very difficult, and it just doesn't. It looks like it doesn't make sense, but it's in fact what was best for him.
Yeah. Let's move on. Question number 4, how does the events of 1 Samuel 25 help us understand the relationship between God's justice, his timing, and human action? And I really want to just kind of focus on human action just for the sake of time. I think that we recognize David's recognition of God and his justice and his timing. Now, I think that he was trying to go around that in the beginning, but he now recognizes that. But what lesson can we see from just the human action here? Recognizing that God's justice is going to take place, that God's timing is perfect, but how does human action go with that? Ms. Shirley?
Well, God is with the upright, and he troubles those who are evil. And when he sees the right time, he will take care of it, so we need to wait on the Lord.
Okay. All right. Norm?
And what Shirley said last there, waiting on the Lord, this is a great example of what that really means, is giving that space in there for you to do whatever is necessary to make the right decision.
Okay.
Whether it's seeking counsel, it's and what I mean in that is going to the scriptures as counsel, seeking also wisdom and counsel from others that are know the scriptures also, and maybe give you different perspective, and so that it gives you time to be able to make a better decision.
Yes. So go ahead, Ms. Penny.
Well, God gave him 10 days. I mean, his wife pointed out what she did, and he hardened his heart, or said it died in his heart within him. But it was 10 days later when Jehovah struck him dead. He gave him a chance to repent, and confess that he did wrong, but he kept his heart
Right.
hardened.
And with all of this, the word decision or choices has been mentioned, and yes, we still play a part. And while we're responsible for making choices, we're responsible for making decisions, and even in situations where tensions might be high or there might be a conflict, and while we might recognize that God's timing is perfect and that He is sovereign, our actions still matter. And so we can't just step back and say, okay, well, God's timing, and God's going to take care of this. We still have a part. God still works through human actions to accomplish His purpose. And so we're still called to be obedient to his guidance. And yes, like Ms. Penny said, in this situation, Nabal still had an opportunity to have repented, but ultimately he was judged for, and justice was had through God. And again, thankfully, David didn't have to do that his own. So speaking of that, and I alluded to this question earlier, but question number 5, compare and contrast Saul's interaction with David in chapter 24 and 26 and with David's interaction with Nabal in chapter 25. And we've already talked about this a little bit. So David is very firm in the situation that we see in chapter 24 and also in chapter 26. And he's actually being pushed by his men of, look, God is putting Saul in this situation for you to be able to take vengeance and for you to be able to stop this constant running because of Saul trying to take your life. And David wouldn't do it. And David multiple times talks about God was going to be the one that would avenge him. So we see an enormous amount of restraint. I mean, he's right there by Saul multiple times and had easy access to have ended his life. But we see this restraint. We see this integrity kind of being shown by David. And then I think that as we've discussed in the beginning of the situation there with Nabal, he didn't have that same level of restraint or that same thought process of let God be the judge. And so I think we need to be more like the David with the situation with Saul and have that patience, have that restraint, recognize the danger of impulsiveness, and then as we've talked about with Abigail, recognize the role of wise counsel and trust in God's justice. Lena?
Well, I think there are two points here. First of all, David has respect for Saul being anointed and respect for Lord's choice. And the second one, I think what Randy said before, in the situation with Nabal, David takes care of his people. I would be more quick to anger if somebody hurts my children than if somebody hurts me. And this is the same. Saul is seeking to kill David, not his people. And Nabal is starving David's people.
Yes, no, I don't disagree. But Saul actually had killed other innocent people on account of David. But yet, I agree, because of Saul being God's anointed, he was not going to do that. Go ahead, Norm.
This is human thought process enter in on David between these two things. And I think the hierarchy, we like to make sure this is more severe than that. We like to rank our actions, people that are important, God's commands. Well, that sin's really bad, that sin's not so bad. And what David failed to realize is the same thing we often, every day, fail to realize is that it's all the same to him. It's not vengeance is mine only when I've chosen this really high person versus this really low person that doesn't really matter as much. It's vengeance is mine. God did not in that statement differentiate between persons. And I think David got caught in the same thing we always get caught in, whether we're thinking about, oh, it's a little white lie or oh, it's murder, ranking who or what we're going to apply God's word to when God does not at all say anything about how severe or insevere this is. It's just, don't do this.
Yeah. Go ahead, David.
One of the comparisons between Saul and Nabal is David, was protecting Saul. David, was going out and into battle and destroying the enemies. But Saul, didn't seem to appreciate any of that. He just wanted to kill him. And then, behind Nabal. I mean, Nabal, I guess, didn't know this possibly, I don't know, but, you know, David was protecting his man out in the field. You know, the young man come and told Abigail about it. And that's another thing too, is the providential hand of God, I think, is a good example here of working. You know, the young man knew who to go to for help, but the fact that Nabal or Saul, either one, appreciated what David had done for him.
Yep. Anything else? Go ahead, Sam.
What this reminds me of is, I guess for myself, not ever really knowing times when I'm weaker versus when I am stronger. Like, you just don't know sometimes, like, how you will respond to something in the moment until you're put in that moment. And I mean, I can't empathize with David's situation directly, but I can definitely see myself being stressed about other situations, and then like maybe being upset with one person, and then not being visibly angry about it, then going to someone else, and then this person's done nothing to me, but then I'm frustrated with this other person, and then maybe I let my emotions slip a little bit with this person who doesn't even really know what's going on. But whatever interaction we're having, it's not nearly as bad as this first interaction that I had.
Yeah.
And like, I guess I can see, David being, dealing with Saul and being, having to flee, having to do all these things. He's already been anointed. He's like, man, I should be the one who's king now. But he knows with respect to Saul what he should let the Lord do what the Lord desires and what his will is. But then when this nobody says, well, who's this David? Like, I can see my pride being hurt in that as well. So you can think that you're, really, you're in a good place spiritually, in one chapter, and in the very next you can be caught off guard. So you should never, ever think, oh, I'm good now. Like, I've overcome this weakness, and now I'll never be tempted in this way again. I think you should always be aware of that.
Pride comes before the fall. Quickly, Norm.
Yeah, no, the interaction is 24, David spares Saul. 25, David almost does not spare Nabal. 26, David spares Saul. And oftentimes we will run through the same sequence in our lives. We'll do something good, we'll get hammered, and we'll do something good again. And when we look back after doing something good, we're like, that time I got hammered was preparing me for this time I'm doing good. That maybe if Nabal had not been there in 25, we would have read a very different story in 26.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. So question number 6, what can we learn from the conversation between Abishai and David in 26, 8 through 11? So this is the other situation where David is now kind of at the feet of Saul and able to kill him, and Abishai is urging him, telling him that God has delivered your enemy into your hands. And of course, David again shows this restraint. And part of it is because of the fact that he was anointed, as Linda pointed out earlier in verse 9, who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless, so he's not going to do that. And he multiple times talks about, God would basically provide the vengeance or the justice, and goes back to what Jesse brought up in Romans 12:19, never take your own vengeance, but leave room for the wrath of God. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But the thing that I really want us to, if you would turn over to Psalm 37, because as we've kind of gone through this, and we've talked about the Psalms multiple times, and how often David writes in the Psalms about situations that he is involved with, and so I really was thinking of Psalm 37 when looking through this. And so in Psalm 37, beginning in verse 1, it says, do not fret because of evildoers, be not envious toward wrongdoers, for they will wither quickly like the grass and fade like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and cultivate faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust also in him, and he will do it. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light, and your judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes. Cease from anger and forsake wrath. Do not fret. It leads only to evildoing. For evildoers will be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord, they will inherit the land. In a little while, and the wicked man will be no more. And you will look carefully for his place, and he will not be there. But the humble will inherit the land, and will delight themselves in abundant prosperity. The wicked plots against the righteous, and gnashes at him with his teeth. The Lord laughs at him, for he sees his day is coming. You can kind of continue on there, but I think of the things that we've been talking about here with David and the situations that he's been involved with, and this is such a good reminder for us to put our trust and our faith in the Lord, and things will go much, much better. Todd?
I can't help but think of Christ here with his impulsive disciples like Abishai, the sons of thunder who want to call down fire from heaven, and Peter who wants to chop off Malchus's ear, and Jesus is explaining that that's not how this is going to happen.
Yes. Yeah, we see that, of course, so much with the connection with Christ here. All right, let's move on to number 7. We got to try to at least get through these. Number 7, Saul continues to pursue David despite David's mercy and unwillingness to harm him. How does chapter 26 illustrate the complexity of dealing with conflict in relationships, especially when the other party doesn't reciprocate your peace efforts? How can we apply David's response in our own lives? So, what's the command as far as our part in keeping peace? So love your enemies, okay. So Jesse had brought up this Romans 12 passage, and there's actually another part of that kind of goes along with what we're talking about here.
Jesus' example of turning the other cheek.
Okay.
Man says, as far as it depends on us, be at peace with every man.
All right.
Everything that we've got needs to be involved in that effort.
So Romans 12, beginning of verse 17, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men, if possible. So far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So like Norm said, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. What does that mean?
We can't control other people.
We cannot control other people. Obviously, David had no control over what Saul's action would be. David continued to try to keep the peace, and obviously we play half of the equation. All right, and so, but what do we do in situations where this peace effort is not reciprocated? How do we then act?
Say and do the right things toward our enemies, regardless of their reaction and their conduct, as Jesus said in Matthew 5:43 through 48.
Yeah, just because they don't reciprocate doesn't mean, okay, well, I tried, now game on. All right, Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Go ahead, Brother Bill.
Last verse of Romans 12, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So that should be our goal.
Absolutely. I see another hand.
Turn the other cheek.
Turn the other cheek. Francis?
What Bill was referring to is, I love that verse where it says, by doing that, you're doing what? Heaping coals on their head?
Yeah.
People don't understand what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's move on to number 8. In 1 Samuel 27, David decides to live among the Philistines to escape Saul's pursuit. How do we reconcile his trust in God with his decision to seek refuge in a foreign land? And how do we discern when to act in faith and when to take practical steps to protect ourselves in times of danger? Ken?
Well, we pray to God to help us and to protect us, but He also expects us to use common sense.
Okay.
And to use our brains to keep ourselves out of danger as much as we can. And He will help us along the way.
Okay. Norm?
Just the idea of doing what we can do and then leaving the rest to God. Things that we can control, be wise in controlling those, and things you can't control, that's in God's hands.
Okay. So if somebody breaks into our house, are we just supposed to sit there and, I trust in God, I'm going to protect me?
Preparation is important.
Okay. Preparation is important. If you run in that situation or if you fight back in a certain situation, does that mean that you have a lack of faith or a lack of trust in God? No. I think of when Jesus was actually tempted over in Matthew chapter 4, and it says, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Okay, we're not going to sit in that situation and say, okay, protect me, God. We're not going to put the Lord to the test in that situation. God has given us the wisdom and the ability to fight or flight, and we have to take advantage of that. We have to take common sense, practical steps to be able to do that. I see another hand. Go ahead, Daddy.
1 Timothy 5 and verse 8 says, but if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. I think that includes that as well. If you're not willing to protect your family, then you've denied the faith.
Yes. And I think about the situation that David was in. He didn't abandon his faith, but he's acting in wisdom, and he's using his own knowledge in this difficult situation. I think of Proverbs 27, verse 12. It says, a prudent man sees evil and hides himself. The naive proceed and pay the penalty. So I think that's like common sense, like Ken said. Norm?
An example of the shepherd, especially since we're talking about David, the shepherd example is used many times, and there are times when the lion comes in and goes after the sheep. The job of the shepherd is to kill the lion and protect the sheep. So life will throw those circumstances at you, and the prepared shepherd will be doing his best to fulfill his duty.
Yes. Sam?
Because Jesus tells his disciples in Luke's gospel to go buy swords before he's handed over for his crucifixion. And I don't know if that means something else or what, but I guess when I read that, I think the Prince of Peace is telling his disciples to buy swords. So they're maintaining their own peace.
Norm said preparation. So, yeah, preparation is not a lack of faith and not a lack of trust in God. All right, we didn't get finished. I'm sorry. Question number 9 is something I do want to discuss, so we'll discuss that next week, and I may start pulling some questions out as we move forward. So, and just as a word from the teacher, I've had a few comments about my questions, and I'm not intending my questions to give you grief or to be difficult. I am intending my questions to make you think. When I write the questions, sometimes I don't even answer them right then, and so I'll go back to them later, and I'm like, what was I even talking about? So just do your best. You may get to a question and say, what's he talking about? I say the same thing to myself sometimes. So just do your best with them, and it'll all be good. Thanks, everybody.